the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host in this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, why they do what they do, and what photography means to them. Jeroen Van Nieuwenhove is a Belgian-Icelandic nature and landscape photographer based in Reykjavík. Internationally acclaimed for his striking imagery of volcanic eruptions and Iceland's untamed wilderness. Having now captured 11 volcanic eruptions, he's built a rare and powerful visual record of Iceland's ever-changing geology. His work reveals the raw energy and surreal beauty of Earth in motion. As a licensed photography guide, Jeroen leads immersive workshops and private expeditions across Iceland and Greenland, granting participants rare access to volcanic sites, glacial landscapes, and remote highland regions. His tours centre on safety, sustainability, and cultivating personal connection to nature. In this conversation, Jeroen shares his journey from hobbyist to professional photographer, inspired by early travels and a life-changing trip to Iceland. He opens up about the technical and emotional challenges of photographing volcanic eruptions, the creative impact of living in Iceland, and the essential role of marketing in building a photography career. Jeroen also reflects on responsible tourism, his photographic philosophy, and the profound sense of wonder that drives his work. His photography invites viewers to witness the Earth's heartbeat, alive, evolving, and endlessly inspiring. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Jeroen. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going? And thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, just fine. Bit of a hot one here in Sydney today. We had, I think, our hottest October day on record. It got up to 39 degrees here, Celsius,
Okay.
which is
The
not right
opposite
in the
for
middle of,
us.
the middle of spring. It shouldn't be this hot.
Yeah, we have our first sub-zero temperatures here today.
Nice.
yesterday.
I'd prefer that.
Yeah, same here.
So why don't we talk about photography and in particular landscape photography? What is it in your life? What is landscape photography to you?
Yeah, landscape photography these days is pretty much my life. I work full-time as a professional landscape photographer, and I have been doing that for the last 5 years now. And it's kind of is basically, it started out for me as a hobby years ago, and in the last 5 years it has quickly spiraled out of control, and now this is my full-time income. So yeah, it's I would say it's a very, very important thing in my life.
Awesome. Well, I want to dig into a couple of things there. One, we'll talk a little bit about how you made the decision to go full-time professional a little bit later, but let's start at the beginning where the hobby actually came from. What motivated you to start shooting landscapes?
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, I was fortunate enough for my parents to take me on these really amazing holidays. So when I was 10 years old, we went to Canada 3 years in a row, explored like different areas in Canada, east and west.
Nice.
We went to South Africa, spent a lot of time in Norway, which was quite literally a day drive from where I grew up in Belgium. And in that time, I kind of got an interest in photography, starting with, these little teeny tiny cameras, like, I don't know how you call them, like one-time use cameras.
Yeah.
Then I went into, I think it was called APS, with funny rolls. Everything went automatic, very focused on panorama images.
Yep.
And then later I found out that my dad at some point had bought a Canon AV1, so it was a semi-professional analog camera.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I started getting very interested in it. So that's my first camera with interchangeable lenses. And I took that primarily to the trips to South Africa. And I really enjoyed that a lot. But for some reason during my teens, I didn't really develop that interest further until later, when I started, or like I was planning a trip to go to Iceland, where I currently live. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to pick up a proper camera again. I want to photograph this trip properly, do it properly. And that's when things really spiraled out of control. Then I started traveling to Iceland a lot more, started photographing a lot more. I started to really discover that landscape photography was something that I really, really enjoyed, especially here in Iceland.
Nice. Okay. And what was, I guess, that influenced that bent towards landscapes as opposed to different genres? You could have gone into portraiture or street photography or whatever. So what was it about natural landscapes that really grabbed you?
Yeah, so first I have to admit I have tried a lot of different things. So when I was discovering this love for landscape photography, I tried. I had a phase where I did some urban exploration. I don't know how big that is in Australia, but in Belgium,
Yeah, there's a little bit of it. Yeah.
It's a pretty big scene. We have a lot of abandoned buildings that are very interesting to shoot. Then I went into had a side gig doing concerts and event photography, and I kind of explored all these avenues. But the thing that I really enjoyed about landscapes is that you are out there in nature. So it's not just about taking the photos; it's about the experience of being out in nature and kind of chasing this perfect moment that sort of doesn't exist. I think that's something that I really enjoy, is like you're chasing these perfect conditions all the time. And every time I come home with this like amazing image, I think, wow, if only this little tiny detail would have been different. And that gives me something to chase for the next time.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really enjoy about landscapes.
I don't think the perfect image exists yet. I've seen some close, but
exactly. This is what I find very fascinating. It's like this whole strive toward perfection while it doesn't exist, and you know it doesn't exist, but you try to sort of one up yourself every single time you go out and shoot, or at least that's the case for me.
Okay, interesting. And you talked a little bit there about your trip to South Africa and some of your other trips where things were, I guess, documenting the trip as opposed to creating art. And I'm always interested in my guests' journey from that documentary sort of photography to artistic photography, because there's subtle differences in the two. Yes, you can make documentary photography quite artistic, but it is truly a representation of what you saw as opposed to something which expresses a feeling about the place or about elements within a scene. And I'm interested in how people sort of, their minds switch from that, oh, I'm taking a photo of this because it looks good, to I'm taking a photo of this because it looks good and this is what I'm going to do with it. And I'm just interested in that process.
I think for me, I think at first this sort of started as a gradual change. Like I started doing things more intentionally, or started to compose things more intentionally, started thinking a lot more about composition. But there's one pivotal moment for me where I really thought, okay, this is where I thought I can do something more with it. And this was on my third trip to Iceland. And I basically, from where I lived in Belgium, it was literally, I would get an hour on a train, take a 3-hour flight, and I would be in Iceland. So it was almost like it was around the corner.
Nice.
And I decided, okay, they had really good Northern Lights forecasted, and I had never seen Northern Lights. And I was like, okay, well, let's just book 2 days. I took some time off work, 2 days, and I got on a plane, flew to Iceland, rented a car, and then I spent an entire day following this hole in the clouds that had formed along the south coast. And as it got dark, I started seeing Northern Lights quite immediately. So the activity was really strong.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized I was close to a glacier, and I realized, oh, wait, like on my last trip, I went to see this plane wreck. There's like a DC-3 US Navy plane that's on the south coast. And at the time, this was not a very well-known location. Like now, there's a massive parking lot. Lots of people go there every single day.
I believe there's a fee now to get in.
Yes, you have to pay parking, and you can be shuttled in, and it has changed so much in the last 10 years. It's incredible. But yeah, I decided, okay, wouldn't it be cool to have this like Northern Lights about this plane wreck? And I decided, okay, let's just go there. And it was so cold. I think it was minus 16, minus 18 degrees Celsius. And I decided to drive there in a straight line. So normally this place is completely covered with sand. And at the time, everything was so frozen. It was like driving on concrete. So it was
Right.
almost driving like in a straight line. You wouldn't leave any marks or anything on the landscape. And I drove there, and that's when I really started to think about, okay, how am I going to turn this into this amazing image? I found a nice angle where it kind of looks like the northern lights were sort of coming out of the plane wreck. And because it was a full moon that day, you don't really get the reds and the purples as much, which means that the vibrant green is very condensed into one line. And to me, this really looked like it was almost like there was like a ghost or a spirit kind of leaving out of the plane wreck. That's when I really started to think, okay, I need to do something with this, because that's my very first, very intentional photo where I thought, okay, this is more of an art thing than me just documenting what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
And that's where I really, where it really started spiraling out of control. And I decided, okay, I'm going to spend way more time on composition and doing my own thing in this.
Yeah. What an amazing experience. I'm interested in...
It was incredible.
I can imagine. I'm interested in how personal experiences and emotions influence the landscapes you choose to photograph. You do a lot of stuff in Iceland, obviously living there now, and you've made that choice. And I'd like to explore that choice as well a little bit later. But I'm just interested in the feelings that you're having when you're there that have obviously driven you to actually uplift life out of Belgium and move to Iceland. What are those sorts of things going through your mind when you're out in the field in Iceland?
Well, I like to be, or I very strongly feel that there are many people on this planet who live very disconnected from nature. And that's something that I very quickly identified as being a little bit of a problem in my lifestyle, which is one of the reasons why I decided to move to Iceland. But for me, I think it's a real privilege to be living in a country where everything natural is so close to my home. I can literally step in a car, I drive for 5 minutes, and I'm in the middle of nowhere with no one around me, no houses around me.
Sure.
And I think that's a real privilege. What I'm trying to do with my photography is I try to show what's out there, show why nature is so important, show why these places are important, but also show that there are so many beautiful things that I have seen that you could be seeing as well. And I think that's something that constantly drives me to go out and shoot, to be out in nature, is to show other people, to try and inspire other people what nature is and what it does to me personally. I write a lot about what it was like to be in places, what it was like to see and experience certain things, especially in the last 5 years with all the volcanic eruptions we've been having.
Sure.
That's something that I really want to convey to people, like what a life-changing experience these things have been for me.
Okay. So let's delve into that life change and the decision to actually uplift and move. What was going through your mind in making that decision, and how did you go about setting yourself up for success in the move?
Yeah, so the first time I came to Iceland was in 2012, and this was about a 2-week trip. And the first thing we did was we went for a hike, a 4-day hike in the Highlands, which is my favorite area in the country. And after coming home from that trip, that really, it's almost like something broke in me. It's a feeling that I can't really put into words. I came back to Belgium and I had this constant feeling of being homesick. And you know how, you go on a holiday, you had an amazing time, and you come home and you're like, oh, I have to go back to work.
Yeah.
And why do I have to do this? And why do I have to do that? I wish I was on a holiday. And it was sort of like that feeling, but not really. Like it felt something different. And
Well, it must
I've
have been much
spoken to-
stronger because most people go back to work and that's it. And the planning then goes into the next holiday, doesn't it?
Exactly. And for me, that wasn't really the case. My mind was stuck here in this country. And what's really strange about this is that I can't really describe this feeling, but everyone that I speak to who has uprooted their life like I have completely understands that feeling. So there are other people out there who have experienced very similar things. And for me, I think, you have two kinds of people. You have someone who kind of stays in that moment and then just goes about their life. And for me, it was like, I feel like I need to explore this a little bit more because I didn't really understand where I was in a mental state at that point. So I went back to Iceland with a group of friends a year later. And then when I came back from that trip, I booked another trip for the year after, almost immediately. I think it was the next day after returning from that trip. And then before that trip, I booked this spontaneous trip to see the Northern Lights that we just spoke about.
Yep.
And then everything kind of just snowballed out of control until at one point, some of my friends said like, "Oh, you're here in the country. Like, I thought you would have moved by now." And that's when I really started to think like, yeah, maybe I should, because everything I was doing was working and then using that money to finance trips to Iceland.
Yeah.
So at one point, I said to myself, what's the worst thing that could happen here? And the worst thing that could happen was that I would move to Iceland and everything would fail and I would have to go back to Belgium. I always had this sort of safety net to fall back on.
Yep.
And that's when, once I made that click, everything was really easy. I just decided, okay, if that's the worst that could happen, then I don't want to turn into 60, 70-year-old who has to constantly think about what if I would have done this. And this is where I then decided, okay, I'm going to sell all my stuff. And I quite literally, I put like an ad on Facebook for all my friends to see. And I said, okay, on Saturday and Sunday between 10 and 5, you can come to my home. Whatever you can carry and give me some money for, you're more than welcome to take. Okay. So within 2 days, I emptied my place. And then as I was kind of wrapping up my life in Belgium, then I spent some time at my grandmother's, and then I moved with 5 or 6 suitcases of stuff that I still had.
Okay.
And that's, in the beginning, I was, it has always been my intention to do something with this photography. So when I moved here, that was my goal, to do something with that. And I started out working at a travel agency as an IT administrator. So I have a background in IT. And my goal to work at a travel agency was, okay, then I can figure out how I can run my own photo trips or become a photography guide of some sort. That didn't really work out. And then after a while, I got burnt out of photography because I felt like it wasn't really going anywhere. I was trying my hardest to turn this into some kind of job, some kind of profession, and I had no interest in my work. I didn't really feel inspired, and I didn't really understand why, because I was living in this amazing place and I couldn't really create the images that I wanted. Then when it really spiraled out of control for me is when we had this first eruption in 2021. Right. This has been a lifelong dream of mine to see a volcanic eruption. And then we have one starting almost literally in my backyard. So that's where I went in overdrive and I said, this is the moment. If I can't do it with this thing that I've been waiting for such a long time, this thing that reinvigorated my inspiration, then it's never going to happen. And I went 200% into this. And that's what got me where I am today.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about the volcanic eruptions and how that has changed things for you. Obviously, that kicked off that moment of inspiration, but I'm interested in what were you hoping for before it happened, and when you heard that things were starting to bubble up and then the eruption occurred, how did you react, and what changes did you make, and how did that actually change your life?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting thing. So I moved right after there was a really big eruption in the middle of the Highlands. I actually traveled to Iceland twice to come and see it. And perhaps that has helped me in my motivation, but I didn't manage to see it, even though I spent 2 weeks here while it was erupting. Because of bad weather, we couldn't fly above the eruption site. And I was really, really disappointed. So when this volcanic system starts waking up close to Reykjavík, I was like, okay, this is the moment, right? Something is going to happen. We're waiting for it. And I had prepared myself in a way that all my batteries are charged, my drone batteries are charged, all my camera gear is ready, my outdoor equipment is just sitting by the door ready to leave. Took some food. I actually went and bought a gas mask with special filters.
Okay.
Because if you ever visit an eruption, it's a very good investment to make in case things don't go exactly the way you are planning them to be. And I was ready and waiting for it. And then about a week and a half before it erupted, all the activity, all the seismicity kind of dies down. And after a few days, everybody's like, yep, nothing is going to happen. This is pretty unusual that right before it starts, there's almost no seismicity. On the Friday after that, so this was almost a week and a half after the seismicity kind of died down, I decided, okay, well, if we're not going to have an eruption, then I'm going to try and focus a little bit more on the northern lights with my friends. And we went on this road trip. I drove 3 hours north of Reykjavík to photograph the northern lights next to a mountain. We checked into the guest house, drove to the mountain that we were going to shoot. And as I was taking my stuff out of the car, I get a message saying that, hey, an eruption is starting. And I'm like, no way an eruption is starting. How could this be? There's no activity of any kind.
Sure.
And effectively, an eruption had started. And I thought, this was just a joke. So we just packed up all the stuff, put it back in the car, went to the guest house for which we had paid for 3 nights. I wrote down a note and said, sorry, but this is happening. We need to go back now. Put all the stuff in the car. And then we drove back to the city. And we kind of drove around the area trying to see if we could catch a glimpse of it. The only thing we could see was a glow in the mountains, and nobody at the time really realized that the eruption had started in a valley, so it wasn't possible to see it anywhere from a road. But there were people everywhere, hundreds of people trying to climb up mountains in the middle of the night, trying to see something. It was like, you have to understand, this was in March 2021.
Yep.
So this felt like the first significant thing to happen since COVID. Icelanders were very excited about something like this happening.
Sure.
And we figured out we couldn't really get to it in the middle of the night. So we went home. I slept for about 3 hours, woke up, and then started calling every possible helicopter company in the country. They didn't have any room that day. So I was kind of frustrated. And then I was watching the television, and on comes this press conference from the civil defense and the government, and they talk about this eruption.
Mm.
And they say literally, and I'll never forget these words, he says literally, we don't recommend anyone going there, but if you go, then you leave your car on this parking lot and you walk in this direction, take enough food and water with you. And it was kind of like we're saying no, but we're saying yes at the same time. So before this press conference had finished, I was already in my car driving to that area. And I walked for about 4 hours from where they said we should be walking, climbed up on top of this mountain, and this feeling was indescribable when you see this tiny eruption. It was almost so small that it was almost no eruption.
Right.
Like if the output would have been a bit slower, a bit weaker, we wouldn't have seen an eruption, I think. And it was incredible, like people were standing very close to it, and it was sort of like this big campfire that appeared out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
And I ran down and I started photographing. And this is where, at first I thought, okay, I got all these images, tried to sell them to a Belgian newspaper through a friend of mine who's a journalist there. And then I got published and I got a lot of attention for what I was doing there. And I kept going back again and again and again.
Sure.
And one of the driving factors for this was social media. So I opened up my Instagram, and what I could see was dozens of people going to the eruption, taking photos of the eruption, but they all had one thing in common. They were all photographing it in the same way, from the same angle, using the same camera. It was almost like there's so many places here in Iceland where people go and photograph a waterfall, and they just want to mimic this viral shot.
Yeah, it's
They
all
want
the
to
time.
mimic.
Yeah.
It's all the same. And for me, it was almost like it was offensive, like this amazing event happened. And why are we trying to condense this into this one image? showing only one aspect of it. So I took this upon myself as a little bit of a challenge, and I went every time I went, I decided, okay, today I'm going to use only my zoom lens, or I'm only going to use my wide angle. Or if everybody's on the western side, I'm going to go to the eastern side.
Sure.
Or maybe today I'll use my drone when everybody else is using their camera. And I was like very intentionally doing something different to show how many angles and how many aspects there were to this. This is something that's where interest in my work really started growing, and where I decided, okay, well, and if now's the time to do something with that. Yeah.
Okay. And sounds to me like to set challenges for yourself, both creatively, but also in your life. Do you think that's something that's true of you? If so, can you explain a little bit about where that challenge setting comes from?
I guess maybe looking back, I think I do, but I don't do it intentionally.
Okay.
Or like I don't purposely say to myself, okay, this is like a goal I want to achieve, and this is a challenge I want to try and beat. But I find that the thing that, especially in photography, the thing that kind of causes me to create challenges is I want to fight against the mainstream. I want to do things differently than everybody else is doing, because nobody wants to watch another person who comes with a portfolio of picture perfect images of Iceland that everybody else has.
Sure.
And that's something that I'm very actively going against. Yeah.
Okay. I'm interested in how you go about that, though. Obviously, thinking about it in different ways and saying, okay, I'm going to do something that's different to everyone else is all well and good. But as you probably know, if you stand in certain locations, then you're going to get that picture perfect shot.
Yeah.
But if everyone else is standing in that same location, they're all going to get the same shot. Is it just as simple as going where other people aren't? Or is it about looking a little bit deeper into the landscape and saying, okay, well, if I move over here, then not only do I get that, but I get this?
Well, I think first I want to make clear that I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that bucket list shot, or taking that shot that you've seen someone else take and you really like it and you want to do your own version of it. I think it has a lot of merit, because you can learn a lot from why do I like that image so much? Why do I like that composition so much by doing it yourself? But what I don't like is if you're only doing that. And that's something that is very true of me as well, is that I go to these places and I'll take the bucket list shot, but then I force myself to look away from it. And I go where other people aren't, of course, but I'll also try to look around in the landscape and try to see, okay, well, how can I make this more interesting? And one of the things that I've really started focusing on is drone photography. And I think drone photography is a really useful tool to do something different. It's not just because you show something from an aerial point of view, but it's because a drone, to me, it's a bit like you have a tripod that you can put anywhere in a 3D space.
Sure.
And that allows you to create compositions that nobody else has thought of. And by spending a lot of time researching beforehand, so I spend a lot of time looking at satellite imagery. I spend a lot of time just going to places and flying around with my drone to kind of familiarize myself with the location I want to take a really nice photo of. I do a lot of preparation, and I also know, and this is of course the luxury of living here, is that I also know that I will get that shot at some point.
Sure.
Because I live here. For me, most of these bucket list locations are a couple of hour drive at most. And I know that if the conditions are right, I just have to wait for that moment, and then I can go there and take the photograph that I want. But it's all the exploration, all the looking around, and especially with the drone, trying to find angles that nobody else has really thought of yet. That's how I go about it.
Yeah, it adds weight to something that I'm quite keen on exploring with photographers, is around how living in a location or being close to a location affects not just what you shoot, but how you shoot. And what you've kind of described there says to me that living there has given you the advantage of looking at different angles and different ways of looking at the landscape within your environment to enable yourself to actually shoot it differently to other people.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately, it's not just about living somewhere, it's about time.
Sure.
It's about giving yourself the time to explore and familiarize yourself before you do something. And one of the things, I run a lot of photography workshops, and one of the things that's kind of at the core of that is that we don't, on my trips, we don't try and tick all the boxes of all the locations and try to cram in as much in a single day, because I think then ultimately you'll return home with a bunch of images that are just bucket list shots maybe, but they're not, you know, you didn't really get to experience the place, you didn't really get to see it. And I think spending more time in locations is far more important than spending less time in more locations. I think, you know, like even if you don't live here, but you come here every now and then and you do exactly that, I think you have a really high chance of getting something compelling and getting something different.
Yeah, interesting. How do you define success in your photography? What is success to you?
I think first and foremost, for me, the most important thing, by far the most important thing, is that I shoot for myself. I don't shoot for other people or to please other people, or I don't take photos that I think other people will like. I take the photos because I like them. And for me, if I end the year where I have, let's say, maybe 10 images that I'm super, super happy with, that's what success is for me. Of course, that's different from, you know, that's personal success. That's different from success as a business, as a photography business. But that's kind of how I try to do things. Like, I used to work in a job before I started in photography. I used to work in a job where I worked for someone who was very financially driven, very like, you have to be here more than the hours that I pay you for, kind of type of person. After that experience, I decided I'm only going to do stuff that I enjoy doing. And I would say 90% of what I do as a photographer is only stuff that I enjoy doing. If I offer a workshop, it's because I want to do that workshop. If I write a blog, it's because I want to write that blog. And of course, every job has its downsides. Not every job is perfect. And I think the bad moments allow you to appreciate the good ones. But it's something that drives me. And for me, that's what success is about. Is, you know, it's not about social media following. It's not about how many email subscribers or website visitors you have. It's about, are you doing something that makes you happy? I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, great philosophy. Let's talk about that decision to become a full-time photographer. Was that driven as part of the move to Iceland, or did it come later? Or was it something you were thinking about earlier? Where did the idea pop into your head? And I guess more importantly, what processes did you put in place to try and make sure that you were successful in business as well as being happy?
Yeah, I think, you know, when I moved to Iceland, that was definitely something that was like, that's sort of the end goal for me, is that eventually I'll find a way to use my photography as a way to earn money, to earn a living. And at first I failed miserably at it. So I found, you know, I worked for a travel agency, and I thought, okay, this is the way to run a photo trip and to become a photography guide. I didn't really have an audience. I didn't really have a way of like building something out of that. For the longest time, I was really stubborn about that. I was like, you know, if this is meant to happen, it's going to happen.
Sure.
Which turned out to be completely wrong philosophy. And I started realizing when this first eruption happened and I got a lot more attention for my work, I started realizing that the most important skill any photographer can have, whether you are a photographer that is really good, whether you're a really bad photographer, this is all very subjective, but like, it doesn't really matter what your skill level is as a photographer. The only skill that you need to have to run a business is marketing.
Interesting.
And even the worst photographers can market themselves beyond anything that you can imagine, and they will run a successful business, even though they are maybe not a good photographer. And
Interesting.
once I started realizing that, I was like, okay, well, this is, I think the problem, especially within landscape and wildlife photography, is that most people who practice within these niches are very introverted people.
Absolutely.
They're people that don't want to necessarily be in the spotlight. They want to let their work shine, and they don't necessarily even like people. That's something that I've experienced a lot. Not that people are mean or anything, but people tend to kind of be to themselves, because that's sometimes why you go out in nature.
Sure.
But it's breaking through that idea that will really make you successful. It's being out there, trying to advertise yourself, trying to get interviews, trying to be on social media, showing your work, showing what you're doing, writing blogs. You have to be out there. You have to really market yourself. And that's to me, once I started realizing that, I took that knowledge and I started looking at people that I thought were successful at what they were doing. And I started looking at, why are they successful? What are they doing differently than what I'm doing? And by trying to adapt some of these techniques that they were using to my own work and to my own ideology, that's when I really managed to turn this into a business that's thriving today.
Awesome. I guess that's one of the biggest lessons that you learned. What are some of the other things that you've learned from running your business and making it a success?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to think about. It's one is that social media following, it can be important, but I think it's only important if it actually gets you something. So, for example, you could have 1 million followers, but if this is a million people who follow your work without realizing what you sell, or without having the financial capability to buy something that you're selling, then what's the use of this following? And I find that with whatever you do, it's a good idea to think a little bit about where to invest your time, what's important, where is the audience that you need to turn your business successful, where is that audience primarily showing itself? Is that on Facebook? Is it on Instagram? Is it maybe just email? Are they reading blogs? Are they watching videos? That's something that you really need to spend time on to understand. And that's where you should put your efforts. And I think that something that I was doing wrong in the beginning as well is that I was putting all my effort in the wrong places. I thought about social media visibility as the most important thing that I could need to turn my business into a successful one. But it turns out my audience was not really spending much time on Instagram. It was not really spending much time on Facebook. So I started focusing elsewhere.
Okay, interesting. I guess without asking for the secret to your success, where did you go looking for them? Where did you find your audience?
I think, there's so many places that you could find just by Googling, or today using AI search, where you could ask the question, this is sort of the audience that I'm looking for. For example, if you're a photographer living in a small community where your audience is going to be people who organize events, who organize concerts, maybe you're doing real estate or something, like it can be very, very different. Like between, are you a local photographer? Is your audience maybe only based in the US?
Sure.
Are you marketing yourself to other photographers, or are you marketing yourself to people who are not into photography at all? And I think this is the valuable piece of advice, at least, is how can you find out where they are primarily active, and how can you tap into that? Like, for example, if you're a local photographer, maybe becoming a part of neighborhood Facebook groups could be very interesting to you. Maybe you want to do old school marketing and put up flyers in supermarkets and things like that. If your audience is primarily located in the US, then maybe you should be looking into SEO. Maybe you should be looking into paid Google advertising. It's really, I don't think there's like a one solution fits
No,
all.
they're
kind of
really,
thing.
really one size fits all. Yeah.
I think it's, asking yourself that question: who is my customer base? Where are they located, and how can I reach them? And once you figure that out, it's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah. Marketing is one side of running a business, but when you're running your own business, you're the CEO, chief marketing officer, chief finance officer, et cetera, plus chief creative officer going out and actually producing the images. How do you balance your time between each of those roles that you have to play in your business?
Yeah, I prioritize things that will end up earning me money in almost like guaranteed earn me money.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend my time in places where I know, okay, if I do this, then I'll probably get a return of this. I think one of the worst advisors is hoping that something is going to happen, hoping that you're doing something that will have some return. I think when I do something, I know it'll have a certain return.
Sure.
And I know that because I've done my research, and I'm a very calculated person.
Okay.
And that's how I prioritize things. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be exploring different avenues within your business, but I think it's very important to not just prioritize what you enjoy doing, but also prioritize what you know will earn you some money in return.
Absolutely.
So, for example, one of the things that I used to do before I started a business was I used to think that exposure is a really good thing. That's something that a lot of
put food on the table, though, does it?
No, it doesn't put food on the table, but also it's a really odd thing, right? Like a lot of companies that want to work with you, they hold exposure as a carrot dangling in front of your face. What I find interesting is that exposure very, very rarely changes into actual tangible business.
Yeah.
People will see your work, they will see your photography, but very rarely will people go down into the caption and read what it's about. They will very rarely dig into the person who took the photo. They will very rarely, there are so many steps that you have to go through until they maybe actually purchase something for you or book you or maybe book a place on a trip.
Sure.
And I think that's something to think about. Like, if I do A, will that return me B, C, and D? Or am I not sure that it's going to return B, C, and D? Does the customer have to go from A to B to C to D to E to F, and then maybe they'll get the options to pick from buying something on my website? I think it's a very important thing to think about.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your workshops. What could somebody expect coming on one of your workshops?
I think first and foremost, they can expect to get a really nice small group experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I focus on a lot. Is I don't like to do groups where we are 14 people standing in the middle of nowhere. I don't think it has any value. I want to keep my groups as small as financially possible because, I do trips in Greenland, for example. Greenland's quite an expensive place to travel to.
Sure.
The group sizes are a little bit larger there, but in Iceland, I tend to stick to 6-8 people.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my workshops are only 3 people. And I think that's really important because I want you to be on a workshop with me and I want you to know that you can ask me questions whenever. I think secondary to that, I think it's very important that we have a really good time as well. It's we can learn photography and we can learn photography in a fun way. And I think that's what I enjoy on my trips, is that I try to make it as fun as possible for people, because photography is a fun thing to do. It's fun to be out with like-minded people on a trip and trying to chase the perfect conditions and getting the perfect shots. And I think that's, for me, what my workshops are about. I don't, we spend time on practical learning. So we're not going to be sitting, you come to Iceland, I'm not going to force you to sit in a classroom and listen to me doing a lecture. I want to be out with you in the field, showing you what I'm looking at, showing you how I'm trying to use the landscape to compose an ice image, trying to use my drone to compose an ice image. I think that's where you learn valuable things, because you can learn theory at home.
Absolutely.
But you can't learn the vision.
Plenty of YouTube videos out there to talk about
Exactly. I think that's what the most important thing is that I try to teach you how I look at things. And I think that's something that's very difficult to learn if you're not there on the spot looking at
Sure.
the same landscape.
Yeah. Interested in talking a little bit about what you mentioned earlier about some of the changes that you've seen in Iceland since you first went. Obviously, that amount of tourism that's been generated, not just from the eruptions, but the ability to see the aurora and the general photograph ability, I guess, of Iceland and the number of tours that are turning up. How do you go about trying to express to people, hey, we're going to go to places that could be environmentally sensitive. These are some of the things you need to think about in going into some of these locations.
That's something that I speak a lot about because it's very important to me. Here in Iceland, the nature is very fragile, and it's very fragile because the growing season here is very short. If you think about it, probably from June until the end of August is the only real time that stuff is, the landscape is actually fixing itself. Plants are growing, and outside of that, it's too cold for that to happen. And it's something that I spend a lot of time on. I show people what happens when people don't treat our nature with the respect it deserves, because there's unfortunately, a lot of damage that has already been done. And I think it's very important. For example, I sell on my website an ebook where I share some of my favorite locations. And my take on that ebook is not that I just give you the locations. Like, of course, there's a map, whatnot, but I give you an explainer on the area. And I do basically the same as what I do when I'm guiding. I tell you about the nature. I tell you what you shouldn't be doing. Some areas you should absolutely, even though you're legally allowed, you should never ever leave the path, because you will leave damage on the landscape that will be there for decades. For example, literally as simple as putting a foot off the path could mean that this footprint will be there for a few decades, depending on the soil you're walking on. And I think it's very important, and I wish more people would do that, because that's the only way to both enjoy and protect the nature we have here.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned some of your favorite spots in your ebook. Do you have one place that just keeps calling you back? And if so, why?
Yeah, there is a place deep in the Highlands, and I call it the magic spot.
Nice.
It has a different name. The reason I call it the magic spot is because every time I go there, I find something else to shoot. And this whole area, like we were talking about, there's an area where you're at the viewpoint and then you look down on a valley, and it's full of these different colored glacial puddles.
Mm-hmm.
Some are turquoise, some are really blue, some are more green, yellow. It's very, very, very beautiful place. It's almost like someone painted it. That's kind of what it looks like. And this whole area, it's only accessible in the summer, and it's a place that I go to, let's say, every other week in the summer, because I really, really love spending time there.
Nice.
But there's so many places like that. I think the Highlands in general, the Highlands of Iceland are just, it's, I often think that Icelanders don't know how much they should appreciate this place, because it's one of the last truly wild places in Europe. Such a large scale where everything has been left untouched. And I think it's something to treasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. What's your most memorable experience in photography?
That's a difficult question. I feel like I have so many moments like that. And I started some time ago on my website to write some of these stories down. I have like a kind of blogging category that I call Behind the Shot, where I talk about some of these experiences and share the photography behind it. If I have to pick one, maybe there's this was last year. So I was on a sailboat expedition that I was running together with Andy Mumford, well-known photographer as well. And we were not even 24 hours into the trip. So this is basically on a sailboat. We were exploring this really remote area in eastern Greenland. And we're not even 24 hours in the trip. And the captain of the sailboat, he comes to me and says, maybe you want to get your people ready because we think we have maybe seen a polar bear on the shore.
Nice.
So I go down into the sailboat and I tell people, get the cameras ready. Everybody takes their long lenses, and we're kind of drifting closer, and we see this polar bear. He's just lying flat on his stomach on a rock. And as we were going closer, the polar bear gets up and jumps into the water. And I had my 500 millimeter 2x extender, so I was shooting at 1,000 millimeters. Absolutely garbage photos I took, but I got the moment where he jumped into the water, and we thought we scared him, but we didn't. So when I came home and I looked at all the images, I pressed down the shutter. I have 20 images to look from.
Yeah.
And in about 3 or 4 of them, you see the head of a seal just out of the water. So he was obviously hunting.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize at the time. And the polar bear jumps into the water and he starts swimming. And I think to myself, like a polar bear, he can swim for kilometers on end without breaks. So I thought this is never gonna turn into something. And after a few hundred meters, he swims past an iceberg, and I jokingly say to the group, wouldn't it be cool if he would now just decide to climb on this iceberg and then pose for us a little bit so we could get some nice polar bear photos? And everybody laughs, and about 10 seconds later, the polar bear stops and he's just floating in the water in front of the iceberg. And my brain is like, I was laughing at first, and then I was like, no way this is gonna happen. And the polar bear starts climbing out of the water, gets onto the iceberg, so he gets on the side, shakes off all the water, and that's when I noticed that higher up on the iceberg there's a hole in the iceberg.
Yep.
And I'm like, no way. He's gonna go to this hole in the iceberg. He's gonna go to this hole in the iceberg, and he walks and stands on the edge of the iceberg, and then goes behind, and he sticks his head through the hole in the iceberg. And like, I swear to God, you could not make this stuff up. And we are just, you can hear all the cameras go. Everybody's shooting. Then he walks around and he sits on top of the iceberg, and we spent maybe another 20-25 minutes just floating there and just looking at him, and he was just looking in the water trying to see if he could find the seal again, I guess, which we didn't realize at the time. And then after a while he climbed back down. It's incredible to see this animal from so close, just climbing on the ice. How they do it, it's unbelievable. I got some really beautiful photos of that, but that moment was like, we're 24 hours into a 7-day trip. And after that encounter, the only thing I could think about was, well, you can just turn around the boat, we go back to the airport, and we can go home. It's not going to get better than this. And the trip was amazing, regardless of that. But it was like, it's very hard to top a moment like that when it happens on day one.
Oh, fantastic. What an amazing experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going from the amazing to the abysmal, do you have any horror stories? Things that have not gone quite as planned?
I think I don't really have horror stories because I prepare a lot, but I don't plan a lot.
Oh.
So I don't, like, it has happened that we are trying to shoot. Like, for example, last summer, I had a drone focused workshop, and this was when we had the leftovers of Hurricane Erin coming to Iceland. And about 4 out of 7 days, we had absolutely horrible hurricane winds during that workshop. I still managed to find the group ways to shoot, still managed to find ways to do drone photography. I think it's all about how you deal with when stuff like that happens.
Yeah, definitely.
And you'll find a way around it and find a solution to it. But like, truly horrible stories, no, not really.
No.
I think if you keep expectations low to start with, it can only get better. Even if the situation is garbage, it can only get better.
That makes sense. How do you go about processing your images? Are you straight into it from getting back from a trip, or is it something that you leave for a little while and you just go through the images as you get time?
I think I do both. So I will always, during a trip, I'll process a few images.
Okay.
When we had a really amazing shot, a really amazing shoot, we'll get back to the hotel or wherever we're staying, and I'll edit a few images because I want, like, I'm in this moment, I'm in this flow of having seen the scene, and I want to kind of finalize that. And then during the winter, when things are a lot quieter for me, like now I'll do a lot more editing, so I can share a lot more images. But I'll do a combination of both, also because I feel it's pretty valuable. If this were to be on a workshop, for example, I feel it's really valuable for participants to see how I approach editing the images that we took in the same situation, because there's a lot to be learned from that for them as well.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of your processing, a portfolio shot, is that taking hours, days, weeks, months, or is it a fairly quick process for you?
I think all of my editing is a very quick process. I think I'll spend minutes looking at something. I always say, jokingly, like, you can make a good photo great, but you can't make a bad photo good.
Yeah.
If the composition is wrong, if the lighting is wrong, then you can put all the lipstick on top of it as much as
And
you
just
want.
turn it black and white. That's the
Turn it black and white. I mean, you're never gonna make it into a great image.
yeah.
That's just not gonna happen. So I spent a lot more time with my drone, with my camera, trying to get it right in the field. And then after that, I'll try to edit in I'll do some masking and do some minor tweaking of the light, because I want my images to be as close of a representation as to what I saw than anything else. I don't like to overcook my images.
What about printing? Do you print yourself or do you use print services?
I've done both. I started out with print services, and I think for most people that's probably a really great solution, because now I have my own printer. I have done for the last year. It's enjoyable, but it's a real process. If you're not big on printing, I wouldn't go down the avenue of printing.
Yeah.
It's a big investment. You need to print a lot for it to make sense as well.
Yeah.
If you don't print frequently enough, then the printhead dries out and you just waste a lot of money on ink that you never get to use.
Yeah.
It is for me, it's a really enjoyable process. But if you're not the person to be patient, I would just use print services and be done with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people go into printing thinking, oh yeah, well, this is pretty easy. But I also find it quite an arcane process for some, where it is very difficult to translate what you see on the screen to a piece of paper. The paper itself makes a difference. The luminosity that you're using for a screen image can't be exactly the same as you're going to use on print. So you need to adjust your brightness, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a whole series of processes that you can go through that you can screw things up or get it right. And not knowing your printer and its capabilities, not knowing your editing process and how that flows into print can really make a big difference to whether or not people successfully print or not when they're doing it themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people probably don't have the patience to try and figure all of that out.
Yeah.
I think when I set up my printer and I was trying to get everything right, this was a process that took me a few days to fully understand everything, trying out different paper types, making sure my screen was properly calibrated, making sure that the brightness of a screen, which is very important, matches. And then, of course, there's the light of the place you sit in that also has an effect on that. So there's a lot. It's a very steep learning curve, I would say. But if you're like me and you like a little challenge, then I think that's it's a fun thing to try and solve, a fun puzzle to solve.
Yeah. I'm interested in how people think about their photography, particularly in those times when they're struggling to find inspiration. You mentioned a time earlier in your career where it was, I'm just not feeling it. How did you deal with that then? And how do you deal with those feelings when they come? Because I think every photographer gets to that creative rut or a period in their photography where they're just not happy. how do you deal with those situations yourself?
Well, I think the most important thing that I've learned is that inspiration, like it can happen in many, many different ways. In my case, this major natural event happened, which is not something that happens for everyone.
You can't just wait around for a volcano.
No,
Certainly
no,
not going to happen
exactly.
where I live.
No. But of course, one of the things that I've learned is that inspiration can come from putting away your camera as well.
Sure.
And I think this is something that I try to put in my own approach, is that very often when I arrive to a scene, the first thing that I'll do is not take out my camera. It'll be walk around, look around, and kind of let the place sink into you before you start shooting. Sometimes I will even just visit places and I'll not take my camera, just so I'm not connected to that pressure of shooting all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, it's a very valuable thing to adapt to your own life, is that not everything all the time has to be about photography to get a good shot. I think sometimes you just have to put it away and then find out why it is that you're interested in this, find out what makes the landscape tick for you first before you start shooting.
Yeah, definitely. I know for myself, when I go out scouting in particular, I'll take my phone, but I'll never take my camera with me if I'm scouting. And going to those locations, that allows me the freedom of movement and freedom of just not thinking specifically about getting a shot, but it gives you the ability to explore an environment, I think, in a way that you kind of go, okay, yeah, well, if I stand about here, just the height to wherever it needs to be, I reckon I can get something that will do what I want. And so thinking about your photography in that way also helps you then get inspired. And as you say, not having the camera with you and just looking at the environment differently can actually make a big difference as well.
Yeah, and it can even be one thing that I've noticed, at least to my own workflow, is to go places that I'm not necessarily that excited about in the beginning.
Sure.
And try to find ways to make them exciting. And I think one way to get inspired is by limiting or challenging yourself in some way. Let's say you only take a 50 millimeter, or you only take a drone, or maybe you'll only take your phone and see what you can do with it.
Yeah.
And I think that these are good ways to try and get you to see things differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
Oh, I think I have to think about this.
Sometimes stumps people, this one. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of, like, I meet a lot of people, and a lot of people share advice from their own work. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think one of the worst things that I've had someone say to me is, and I actually get this question quite a lot, this, why don't you have a YouTube channel?
Yep.
And I think for me, there's some merit to it. Like, it's not like it's a bad thing, but I think what's bad about it in today's climate is that there's so many people doing YouTube channels on landscape photography, or wildlife photography. And that's not to say that it doesn't work for some people, but I think there are so many people now that it's getting harder and harder to kind of pierce through that, to stand out and do something different. And you can also only make so much content about the same things.
Absolutely.
Because landscape photography inherently it's always the same thing, like the styles change and equipment changes, but the ideas about composition are going to be largely the same. So how can I make content about this that's going to be different than what's already out there?
Sure.
And yeah, I think, if you do that, then you need to make sure that you're doing something that will stand out, because otherwise it's a lot of time spent on something not so useful.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few people start them up and then just abandon them after a couple of months, sometimes even less, two or three videos maybe.
But it's the same for me.
Yeah.
I've done exactly the same thing. And I also it's not that I don't like making videos, it's more about I don't feel like it fits for me.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't fit with what I do. I enjoy writing a lot more than I do talking to camera.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of then ties into what's maybe the best piece of advice is that don't try to blatantly copy what makes other people successful, but try to be inspired by what they're doing, but try to do it in your own way. Because if you stay true to yourself, that's the only way you're gonna last doing anything.
Absolutely.
Don't try to pretend to be someone else.
Yeah.
That's kind of, yeah.
What do you see as photography's place in society?
Well, I think landscape photography, because that's the niche I know most about, I think it has a very, very important part in society in many ways. First of all, I think landscape photography is a way to inspire people to see nature, to go out in nature, to see
Sure.
these incredible things, but also it can inspire people to protect them, and it can make people aware that we need to protect certain places. Like here in Iceland, for example, I regularly get an Icelander who says to me, well, you know the country better than we do. Or I show them a photo of a place and they're like, I have no idea where this is. And I've been there maybe hundreds of times. And they don't, half of the time, don't even know what's in their backyard. And
Yeah.
they don't even know what needs protecting and why it needs protecting. I think also what's very important about landscape photography is the mindfulness of it. I think being out in nature with your camera, it's a way to take time for yourself. It's a way to kind of mentally find some rest. And I think that's why there's a lot of good things to be found in landscape photography. It's not just about the images, it's about being outside and being, giving yourself some breathing room and giving yourself some space.
Yeah, totally. What do you like to do when you're not doing photography?
I'm sort of doing photography all the time, but I like to read. I like to spend time with my daughter. Yeah, I think I'm in this weird place where photography isn't just it isn't the hobby only. It's a hobby. It's my job. It's kind of intertwined.
Sure.
So it feels like even though I'm working, it's still relaxing to me as well. So it's, I don't know. It's kind of intertwined, entangled somehow.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, we need to wrap up shortly. Just a couple of questions. Are there any photographers out there that you think I need to be talking to?
I think you should be talking to Nigel Danson if you haven't.
I haven't yet. I have asked him, but unfortunately, he wasn't available when I would have liked to talk to him. But I'll definitely hit him up again.
Yeah, he's. I'm very fortunate that I'm working with him as well.
Nice.
But he's one of the people that got me interested in landscape photography. Watching YouTube, watching what he was doing, which has been a big inspiration. And then I think Andy Mumford, a very interesting photographer to speak to as well. He has his own vision, his own style, and he's an incredible photography teacher as well.
Yeah, I like Andy's work. Yeah, he's fantastic. Well, thank you for those. I've only got one more question, and for many people, it's the most important one that I can ask. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I like pineapple on pizza. Yeah,
very good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to spend some time with us here on Landscape Photography World. Where can people find your work, Jeroen?
You can go to my website, which is very simply put, jvn.photo. And then also on social media, Instagram, it's always the same. My Instagram handle is the same as my website, which is jvn.photo. And that's probably the two main places I'm most active these days.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Have you had an experience where you have found awe and inspiration in your photography? Leave a comment below and let me know. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast, grantswinburnphotography.com, along with prints and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps the podcast to be seen and heard. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.